Hey there, folks. Thanks again for coming out today. I am, of course, joined by the infamous Ashish Rajan
Thank you for having
this
us.
presentation. Yeah,
Yes.
thanks.
I think, by the way, we're going to have a starter question. How many people here think hot dog is a sandwich? Anyone? Hot dog is a sandwich? No one believes it. Oh, there was one person. Thank you so much. Yes. Hot dog is a sandwich. It's lunchtime, so we're thinking about food in the background, so we thought it would be a great way to start. So this is a conversation, and I'll let Andrew drive the conversation. So maybe should we talk about ourselves a bit? Who are we? Sorry? What's a Datadog?
That's actually a great segue to our first slide.
Great question.
This is, of course, a partner theater session, and Datadog is an observability, metrics, and monitoring platform. Of course, the last 3 years, we've been making a big play for the security space. We have our demo booth actually right over there. If you want to go see a demo of one of our emerging sort of security products, we have logs, Cloud SIEM, Cloud Security Posture Management, application security, cloud workload protection now. So just all the things that you would kind of expect to see from a security vendor on the show floor. So today, we're actually going to talk about we're going to put a bit of a security spin on a report that Datadog does every year that we call the Datadog State of Serverless. And the way that we kind of create this report is we actually take anonymous customer telemetry from all of our customer environments that are doing serverless tracing, and we use that to roll up some fun metrics on industry trends. And we've actually already done the readout on this report, but we want to think security as we walk through the facts today. And fun fact, Ashish and I actually chair the CNCF's Serverless Security Technology Advisory Group. So I thought it'd be great to have Ashish join us today to bring that perspective.
Glad to be here. I was going to also say that one of the things that we had to look for people who don't know what CNCF is, Cloud Native Cloud Foundry.
Cloud Native Computing Foundation.
Clearly, we have to do some work with the abbreviation. But the intent with the organization is to have information collected from all these contributors around the world for what does this particular technology look like. Cloud native, they do Kubernetes, serverless, they talk about a lot of things. So yeah, I think basically what we're calling out, research is coming out soon as well. And the hope is, as we kind of do the readout, I can put the CISO hat, that's what my day job is. So we get to kind of talk about from both perspectives for what Datadog identified and what a practitioner would probably think about the information that's being shared. So hopefully that helps. Let's go.
Yeah, with that, we'll get to the facts, and we can keep this small and informal, right? So if you have a question, just raise your hand, and we're happy to engage with you during the session here. How many people today in the audience are running serverless in their cloud environment?
Wow. Pretty awesome.
So the majority of people, that tracks actually with the first fact, which is that over half of organizations have adopted serverless in one of the 3 major clouds. And what you're looking for is actually a percentage of Datadog customers that are using serverless technology in AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure. So you can kind of look at them there in terms of popularity. I think this is a great fact to just show us all that serverless is really here to stay. And maybe even you might have serverless in your environment, and you just might not know, because you might have like 1 or 2 functions for little ancillary tasks. It has a habit of just kind of finding its way into an environment.
I was going to ask, for people who use serverless, are you using it for back-end activity, or is your application itself running on serverless? Application running in serverless? One gentleman there, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many people are using it for back-end functions? Oh, so same for, right, okay, complete serverless. That's pretty awesome, because I think that kind of ties into this conversation as well. So in the organization that I'm working for as well as a CISO, we kind of have a mix of, I guess, there's an adoption curve in the organization to go fully serverless, but from a security perspective, it adds a bit more complexity for, we already have mixed compute. For people who would not have gone serverless in the beginning, we have, if I use AWS, considering we're on AWS Inforce, we have EC2, ECS, ECR, and the whole mix. But I definitely find the adoption rate, we kind of spoke about this earlier, but from a security perspective, it adds complexity to us. As organizers, we're talking about SOC teams have to now not just look at containers, EC2s, but also how do I do this serverless thing that doesn't have a server behind it? And we'll go into a fun fact later on about it as well. But
Yeah, and I think it becomes a bit of an observability challenge, right? Because we have these very small ephemeral environments that get tossed away at the end of execution. So how do you know it's in the environment? How do you know that the thing that's in there isn't being hacked or abused in some way? And this is kind of the challenge that we're all trying to figure out and like wrestle with, especially with, I don't know if anybody saw the great articles that recently came out on serverless malwares. Bespoke malwares purpose-built for the cloud, purpose-built for serverless.
Yeah,
So,
I think denial of wallet was another one. Has anyone heard about denial of wallet for serverless? Essentially, you have? Essentially, the idea is, and fortunately, we had some kind of protection for it. But the idea was because it comes up and goes away, but there is no set number of resources you can create because it based on the function of you invoke a serverless function, and you can keep sending it calls until your wallet runs out or your basically billing alert comes in. There is no way for you to stop it. So we kind of got into a fix with one of the situations where we did not know we were using serverless. We found out later on, as I admit this. But we also identified that the only reason we found out was because the finance team got a billing alert that there was like, I don't know, $5,000 charged on something. And we're like, what is this thing? So I kind of tracked down, there's like a serverless function being pinged because it was in the internet. So being more serverless also means you have to keep, I guess, observability, as Mr. Andrew mentioned over here.
and inside of serverless, right, you have the same concerns as an engineer that you would have with a regular cloud workload, which sort of brings us to the next fact, which is what are the most popular languages inside of a serverless environment. And you can see kind of that Node and Python are more or less neck and neck. Python, I believe, since the last time that we published this, has slightly overtaken Node. But I think from a security angle, if I just put my security hat on, the interesting thing here is these are actually the two languages that have had the most supply chain problems in the last year. If you've seen kind of the typo squatting attacks.
PyPy, NPM packages. I mean, for folks who have been working on the whole open source space where I think it's called source SCAs. And the idea behind you have dependencies for applications that are being used are open source. And primarily what Lambdas and serverless in general is someone writing an application for you. And Python, Node.js, or probably to what Andrew said as well, open source packages are quite heavily used in this space. So PyPy, if someone wants to Google this later on, as well as they introduced a mutual TLS to get around the problem. What they found was a lot of the open source libraries being used by some of the popular libraries in Python, which was in PyPy, was using malicious code. Same with NPM packages. I think it's like, I don't know how often, but it sounds like 20, 30 per day or something. It's like something insane. NPM packages are notorious for it as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you have kind of a software integrity challenge here. And you might look at this and you might say to yourself, Andrew, if I'm building on serverless, I'm probably going to build all in the same language, right? But no, we live in a microservices world right now. So the majority of organizations are actually building in 2 or more languages on top of serverless. So in addition to these observability concerns, we also now have a very diverse pool of languages. I look at this and I wonder, what is the architecture for the 6+? Is that 6 or more languages?
I think one more challenge I'll add over here is sometimes you're not creating yourself, and to what Andrew said, you start off with the intent of having one language, but as part of acquisition, M&As, you get other organizations coming in, they might be on Google Cloud or Azure or wherever, and you may be a .NET shop, but they've always run Java, their developers only know Java, now suddenly you're in this like mix of, well, I don't want to completely say no to them, but I do want to manage them as well. So that's something that we've, at least most of the conversations that I've had with other CISOs, that they found as a problem, that you start out with the right intent, but as you kind of go down the trajectory, like everyone's AWS until like 3 years ago, now most people are multi-cloud. And I hope AWS doesn't kill the feed for this, but there are definitely a lot more organizations that are seeing multi-cloud, and same with the languages that are coming across as well. I think in my organization, we started with .NET, but people have discovered that you can have great TypeScript, Python, Node.js, and now we have this mix of, I don't think we are 6+, but we're definitely 2+, let's just say that.
The next fact here, I think, is a great follow-on for that denial of wallet attack that Ashish mentioned earlier, which is that if you don't put the right guardrails around who can invoke functions and how, they can very quickly exhaust service limits in the account, for example, and you could just purely run out of API calls, or this could potentially be very, very expensive. And when I look at this graph, it actually is not the distribution I would have guessed it would be. That the majority of Lambda functions are actually exposed to the public internet via API gateway, right? So what that's telling me is that the most popular use case for serverless is really HTTPS, probably REST APIs, something along that line. I would have guessed it would be asynchronous processing, right? And you can see that those two kind of follow very closely, with SQS and Event Bridge being kind of the next two. But this is just a really interesting fact that API Gateway is responsible for half of all Lambda function invocations.
I think for people who would have gone to RSA or some of the other conferences, some of the themes that came out of those conferences was API security is still missing education in its space. A lot of people think they know API security because if you talk to, say, any cloud service provider, they talk about the fact that we have throttling that you can enable, we can do all these things. But if you ask a practitioner, API security is a lot more than just throttling and DDoS protection, and it's not really a WAF problem. So it's worthwhile noting to what Andrew said, majority organizations are going microservices first, even though we've had monoliths for a long time. But that opens up the challenge for internet exposed applications which are running serverless, which means your OWASP top 10 is suddenly applicable to your serverless application now. And the second one being internet exposed versus private. The challenge that we had was we're trying to still discover all the APIs. So hopefully more Amazon API gateway doesn't mean you don't know what APIs are running on your platform. So that's what my take would be there.
Yeah, I put on my defender hat here, and I think about what I would want to put in front of this API gateway, right? What kind of IAM authorization pipeline in terms of an access proxy or custom authorizer? What kind of web application firewall do I want to have to prevent sort of that denial of wallet type attack? So that's where my brain definitely goes here. If we break this down one step further, and we look at that API gateway line there, we broke out actually how many of these are single-purpose functions versus how many of these are what we would think of as monoliths. And when I say monolith, I mean that somebody's crammed an entire ORM into a Lambda function, like maybe it's an entire Django app or an entire Flask app. Is anybody using, and I mean, it's okay to admit to this, even though it's the lower number, is anybody using Django or Flask inside of serverless today as kind of a workaround for just no maintenance or low maintenance? I've done it. I'll admit to it. I put Flask in there.
I have a Cold Fusion scenario, so I'll probably put that. Cold Fusion is also there. People still use Cold Fusion.
I don't know if anyone saw, like, one of the big announcements from reInvent 2 times ago was that you could actually run COBOL inside of Lambda, and everybody was really excited about this, right? Because they could make a lot of legacy code that exists in banking and like fintech live on inside of serverless functions. And I thought this was both amazing and terrifying. But the majority of these are what we'd expect in a microservices world, that they're specialized, very single-purpose functions that are, in fact, really embracing the design pattern for serverless.
Yeah, I think the one challenge that at least some of us and my colleagues are facing as well is, and this kind of proves this over here, because we have a lot of microservices, we have a lot of APIs, if you're primarily a serverless organization, there is something called too many serverless applications as well, the same way there's too many microservices. And it does get to a point where observability, as Andrew pointed out earlier, becomes a challenge because you're not sure what Lambda function is used for what, whether it's a back-end function, front-end function, is the entire application for that business department running on serverless. It adds a lot more complexity, and I think most organizations are trying to come out of the monolith, but to what he said earlier, Flask, we kind of have to sometimes find a fix and continue with it. So that's another challenge we come across more often as practitioners.
The next fact is where it gets actually really interesting. So there was a big announcement a couple reInvents ago that all of a sudden now, instead of just delivering your code to Lambda via a zip file, which was what we had first, the surface area was 25 megabytes. Then we got Lambda layers, which could be up to 2 gigabytes. Now we can actually bring an entire Docker container image as the runtime for the environment. And I don't know if this terrifies you or if you actually think that it's awesome. I personally think that it's awesome to see this kind of consolidation on containers for everything, regardless of what the execution environment is. But obviously, it's very popular and only increasing in popularity over time since the launch.
Makes me a bit nervous, to be honest. So I don't know how many people work on container space, but there is this concept of everyone talks about the best practice that containers should be like the image used for a containers should be in your own repository, like if you use ECR from Amazon. But most scenarios that we found in the conversations was people try and download container images from Docker Hub or like a public site, and supply chain suddenly becomes like a thing for people who kind of consider that as an important thing. You have no idea what that image does have, and if you're, quote unquote, if you're okay with that as well, you don't know what libraries are running in that container. And so I think from my perspective as a practitioner, yes, it's a great step forward, but it also means it complicates it a bit more as well. Whether am I going to be able to get visibility into, and I probably throw the word visibility, but what I'll call out over here is the supply chain for containers. But it has been a challenge before, even before Lambda started using it, and now the whole selling point of Lambda for us was, oh, I don't have to patch anything, but I'm back to patching again. So for me, it's like a step back rather than a step forward, but I think it's a really interesting fact.
Yeah, it all comes down to the developer tooling, right? So if we have great developer tooling that's consolidated on containers, I think we can kind of put all of our security tools in a single basket across Kubernetes, serverless, et cetera, whatever you're using to run your containers. And that's where the big security value comes for me when I look at this graph.
Sweet.
No surprise here. If you're using containers or if you're using serverless technology, you're probably more likely to adopt things that are also low maintenance or no maintenance, like ECS Fargate. So we see a very, very strong correlation of Lambda customers running on Fargate versus Lambda customers that are running also ECS on EC2.
Out of curiosity, is anyone using ECS Fargate? Like there were people using serverless Fargate. Oh, couple using Fargate. Hey man, Fargate. Oh, there's quite a few Fargate people. So that stands. IAM role. Please look out for the IAM role.
Yeah.
Containers.
I mean, it's the same concern with serverless, right? Is we all have to keep track of all these ancillary things around the execution of the function, like what VPC you're putting the executing function in, how permissive the IAM role is, what the authorization pattern is.
Yep.
So, I mean, the risk doesn't go away just because we lean into either of these. It just really lets us laser focus on those controls that really, really matter.
Cool.
Well, we have 2 minutes left. If you're here and you enjoyed the session, please fill out your session survey. I really, really love to see the session surveys and your feedback on how you liked the content, how you liked us. We're actually going to do this again, believe it or not, in 20 minutes. So, and we're going to do it differently.
Yeah.
We're going to be a totally different format.
Same slides.
Yeah. Same slides.
But I do want to ask, does anyone have any questions for us? I think we've been kind of sharing these insights from Datadog. A lot of people use serverless. What do you see as a thing? And this is a safe corner. Feel free to ask your question. If we can answer it, I'm sure someone else in the crowd can. Any questions for us while we're here? Or any challenge you see with serverless? Everyone solved their... Oh, there you go, Kapil. There you go. Sorry, you might have to come a bit forward. Sorry, man.
Sorry, two questions. One is data source on the numbers, and the second is, as a challenge, developer experience
Challenges developers. Oh, there you go. Thank you.
So 2 questions. One is data source on the numbers. Second is developer challenges with VPC attached lambdas.
Ooh. I'll let you answer the first one if you want.
Yeah, I'll do the first one because it's the easiest. So if you just Google Datadog state of serverless, the numbers are all from anonymized telemetry that we roll up from our serverless tracing library where it's attached in the Datadog customer environments. So we actually have the methodology and the entire data annex in the full report, which is available on the Datadog corporate site.
And the second question answer is, we did not go for it. I think this is my personal experience. I'm sure others can share theirs. We did not go for anything VPC attached because the idea was serverless first, container second, SaaS first, serverless second, and then followed by containers. So yeah, we never gone down that path because it just would have been a blocker for developers. And working for a CISO, working as a CISO for a product company, that just meant that we just had to remove the blockers. So it would not, it would add challenges, let's just say that. Thank you. Any other questions while we still have a few seconds to go? Sweet. Thank you so much.
Thanks again for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much. Thank you.